despite the non-contingency, he's amongst the first ones who's arriving here, and obviously they have a personal rapport also from the carrying on from the first term of the President Trump. How do you see this going forward, in terms of strategic cooperation?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks. And thank you to USISPF. Very happy to join my wonderful colleagues on the panel. Look, it's a pretty clear signal. I mean, that India is a high priority for Trump 2.0. The president personally invited the prime minister in a phone call. The prime minister readily accepted. I think it's earlier than you'd normally see this kind of visit, and I think that's a testament to the fact that this relationship and the high ambition each country has for the relationship as something that's important to their own national interest. I think that's what you see. And I think as we saw in the last time around with the Trump administration, even difficult issues, I mean, trade issues, there were tariffs, there was the removal of GSP, those sorts of things were there, but those didn't dampen the enthusiasm behind the relationship and the major progress that was made, including in the defense and security space, the conclusion of most important fundamental defense agreements that underpin the ability for the U.S. to partner closely with a country like India. So I think this is going to be high ambition, and I think they're going to be talking a lot about the region, regional security, the Indo-Pacific, China, defense ties, and high-tech cooperation.
Ingrid, defense and tech cooperation, usually are a very vexed kind of an issue because technology transfer becomes most challenging aspect, irrespective of your best intentions, irrespective of the might of the administrations. Bureaucracies being bureaucracies will certainly work in a certain manner. But as far as the early visit of the Prime Minister is concerned, with this, you have almost full term of the President Trump in front of you. And the patience and the time that you need to sometimes work on the vexed issues is available.
Thank you. I think you're already seeing that they're stepping into this role where there's been progress made over the last two administrations. So first, you had the major defense partner under Obama, and then shortly after, India was put into a different technology category, allowing the easy technology release of dual-use items. During the Biden administration, you have really path-breaking programs like the GE engine deal, where you're looking at 80% tech transfer. That's unheard of. I mean, that's an offer that has not been extended to other countries. And so that's something that has been uniquely offered to India. And I think we're going to see a continuation of that. I think the Trump administration was very forward-leaning in its first term, treating India in this higher category. The rebranding, the fact that it's now the Indo-Pacific that's in the vernacular used here in Washington. You have Indo-PACOM. And we're seeing a lot of really exciting collaboration between our industries. So the private sector, I would say, is at the forefront of that, and they've broken down a lot of those barriers.
And do you think the fact is also this, that this special category status is something that Indians would naturally expect and desire, keeping in mind that India has always been a very responsible power, even when it comes to usage of the military software or any kind of strategic leeway that it has. And going forward, that's the way it's going to be seen, with a special prism of Indo-US ties, not being hyphenated or not being boxed into some kind of a particular area or region or geography.
Yes, I completely agree with what Vikram and Ingrid said here. I think as you look at the relationship and President Trump and Prime Minister Modi laid a strong, robust foundation in Trump 1.0, and that continued and has continued to grow. But the 6 stakeholder buckets, if you will, that fostered the relationship to be closer and therefore not hyphenated, as you mentioned, would include the political spectrum, and there's a lot of synergies over administrations on that. Then the bureaucratic spectrum, there's a lot more understanding of how the systems work, both in terms of procurement as well as operational aspects, including joint exercises, etc. The third bucket would be academia, and often not spoken about, but academics and think tanks are behind the org charts that make a lot of these things happen. The fourth bucket would be the media and the communications piece, and how the perceptions of both countries as they're aligning themselves on various elements of the defense relationship. And then, of course, there's also the end users. And I think the end users in both countries are seeing the benefit of this increased synergy as we're looking for a better global secure order, and the Indo-Pacific was mentioned as well. Finally, the industry captains, whether you're talking about the large industries or the medium or small or the startup communities, I think there has been a sea change in the last few years thanks to the leadership of Prime Minister Modi as well as President Trump and President Biden, and that will just continue to grow.
My question would be, in that sense, that defense is one marquee sort of a sector in this entire cooperation. In fact, I was talking to a ranking diplomat yesterday, and he said that if you go back 20 years, there was hardly any cooperation. There was hardly any interoperability was an unknown term. And now platforms are just one extension of the whole cooperation, whether it is P18, etc. But the whole relationship of the countries has taken such a platform that strategic relationship becomes just one part of it. The entire out of the entire gamut, as our colleague very eloquently described, 6 buckets of the relationship. But do you think that defense and the tech transfer still remain the centerpiece of this relationship, or it's just one of them?
I think I would agree this is one of the reason being behind is India was very much dependent on Russia for the defense technology in past, and eventually last 10 years they have taken effort to go away from Russian platforms, depend on Israeli and French, and now last 5 years the focus with INDESX and ISET was to depend on US on tech. And there's a large opportunity for companies, US companies, whether it is GA, Boeing or Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, to co-develop, co-design, co-manufacture in India, because both the heads, whether it is Prime Minister Modi or Trump, both things like businessmen, and they want to be self-reliant. So there's a large opportunity there to co-manufacture, co-design, and have a separate IP sharing, technology sharing things. And I think the X factor will focus on more technology side in this term. And I believe a lot of technology transfers on both sides will happen. India is also focusing on creating IPs. DRDO has been given mandate. This time the budget has increased from the earlier in defense spend. And India being consumption market for defense and US being the export market, it's a good pair for both the countries.
Good pair for both the countries. So you see that platforms or the tie-ups like I said receiving a further fillip?
I would imagine. I would imagine so. The indications from the National Security Advisor, from the new Secretary of State Marco Rubio, have all been that when it comes to Indo-Pacific writ large, things that we've seen recently are likely to be built on. I don't know if there'll be rebranding. I don't know if there'll be no focuses, but I do believe that the fundamental desire to make a technology ecosystem that rivals the commercial technology ecosystem you have between the United States and India, which is extraordinarily robust. There's not really a major American tech player that doesn't have a huge presence and have India playing a very important role in what they do. And I think the intent is that would be a way for the United States to basically more rapidly innovate and also to potentially compete in the global marketplace. Because if you start building more things in India that are defense specific, and if you start in new areas like undersea technologies and space technologies and things like that, you might be able to realize some of the cost arbitrage that would let you actually, maybe be competitive in other markets, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, Africa. And I think there's a vision of India has a vision of making India for the world. I think there is a shared vision of, make India, the U.S. industry cooperating to make for both countries, but also for the world. Whether that can be realized, I think there's a lot of things that would need to happen, but I think that vision is actually pretty robust, and so I expect things to go on.
So for that to happen, manufacturing will have to happen in India. Do you think that's possible under Mr. Trump?
It'll be a delicate balance, right?
Because he's obviously about making America, not so much in making anywhere outside America.
Right, but I think that there also are potentially benefits that can be derived here in the U.S. You look at the talent base in India, you look at cost savings that can be achieved. The fact that there is manufacturing today, there are global supply chains that exist. It's not an either or. There are a number of countries where, again, take Turkey, for example, where we've shifted some supply chains out of how can India benefit from that? So I think there's definitely a role. There's definitely value that India brings to the table. So I think it's a win-win, and I don't think it's just bilateral. I think if we look at this multilaterally, for example, we have a client from Australia that's manufacturing aerostructures in India. And so we're, effectively looking at opportunities that go beyond just this bilateral, but certainly in the Quad realm.
If it's zero sum, make in India instead of America, and it's a net, then I think that has a real problem. But a lot of these things, to Ingrid's point, could potentially be more in America, coming along with making in India, because you're increasing the volume. So you would have to make that case, though.
But you think in your mind that the space for that kind of an exercise exists in the minds of the leaders?
Yeah, I think there's the imagination is there to really have this be not just in tech, but in actually manufacturing, in critical minerals,
India,
supply chain security.
I ask you this question because for India, large-scale manufacturing is the panacea that we are probably looking at when it comes to solving the ever-present and ever-looming jobs crisis in that country, and that's a challenge of most developing world.
I think challenge of most of the industrialized world too is that they've lost too much manufacturing, and that China has claimed too much manufacturing globally. And I think this becomes a joint battle. In the best scenario, it becomes a joint battle.
And just to add one more point, there are offers on the table where it is manufacturing lines that could go to India. It may not be viewed as cutting edge technology, but it is. These are systems that are still in place. They're in warfighting scenarios. And so those are job creators. It's exactly to your point. This isn't just a strategic decision. It's something that, in fact, would have economic benefit in India as well. And so those, whether it's Javelin, the Stryker program, the F-21, there are a number of opportunities that I think could be seized early.
As I said, bureaucracies being bureaucracies. Can it be taken forward? But of course, this time we do have an advantage of an early start. And we still have full 4 years of President Trump's term to begin with. Do you think that that's going to help? Do you think that there's a real possibility where we can think of shifting some high-end manufacturing to India, which is in itself able to sort of germinate some kind of large supply chains?
Yeah, I think the building blocks, if you look at the critical and emerging technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or any of the various things that have been put on the table in the last few years, those are the building blocks that would tree up into platform-level co-production, co-development. And I think we need to elevate the conversation in both countries to a platform-level situation where we are leveraging, as Ingrid said, the fact that you have very high-skilled folks in India, as well as the fact that you can have cost efficiencies by and trust.
Trustworthy partner.
Exactly.
To any kind of high-end technology, there are no allegations of any kind of pilferage, any kind of patent stealing, etc. on our manufacturing, and some very reliable partners have emerged like Tata's.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of synergies, I think, in the end objectives of both countries by doing this and elevating the conversation to platform-level discussions, because thereby you build out supply chains as well. And it's not just about the large companies, but it's also about the medium and small and the startup companies, and they can all integrate into this. So I see in the next few years that's what's going to happen. I think the businesses on both sides are keen to see the pie grow, so to speak, and I think India and the U.S. are best positioned to leverage that.
Speaking of the bureaucracy, I feel that India has opened up defense for private sectors very soon.
There are new players like Adani Defense.
Yeah, various players and big players who has been working on, and there is another opportunity on the other side if US opens up with the TAA compliant, where India is not being part of the country compliant list, being Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, Canada, Taiwan are the part of the country. If India becomes, and then ITAR, CFIUS, this kind of compliances become easier framework for India. And if bureaucracy can work on this, it will be much more easier to replicate what we have replicated in commercial of the world. There were JVs between Boeing, Tata, a lot of Lockheed Martin, a lot of companies have done JVs in India for commercial world. But I think now is the time frame where we can focus similarly on defense side.
I'm glad that the talk about the AI came into being, because many are describing that 2026 would be a breakaway year, so to say, for AI and its mass replication. Our interest, of course, Indian interest is in the fact that AI is used for the benefit of large swath of our population, to ensure that the benefits reach the last mile, and also to ensure that a qualitative change in the lifestyles of those people come. So you think that with the focus that India is now putting on AI, Prime Minister is just coming here after co-chairing an AI summit, and the American sophistication in the AI, that can also work together, other than other sectors where there is already a palpable cooperation?
I mean, I think it's almost an imperative. So, I mean, obviously, Prime Minister Modi went to the AI summit. I think you saw Vice President Vance was there, and he made clear that the U.S. focus is shifting from worry and fretting about AI safety, and is moving to AI ambition and AI confidence, and sort of trying to deliver as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And I think if you look at how India has managed, for example, the digital stack and the transformation of the Indian economy, from a cash...
Great examples of UPI and
UPI, Aadhaar, all these things that
platforms are complete display of ingenuity.
Right, and that India is trying to offer to the world. If you look at the engineering pool, if you look at the brain power that's driving AI, a lot of it is Indian. There's a lot of capacity. What India doesn't have is the compute capacity and the architecture, the
Probably
infrastructure.
not at that level where we would want it to be.
Right. But that's probably an area of opportunity for investment as well. And on terms of innovation in AI and partnering, I think it's hard to see how you sustain the U.S. lead and the Western lead without India in the face of competition from, for example, from China. So I think it's going to feature prominently. I think there'll be a lot of ambition on what we can do in AI together. And I think a lot of the big Indian players are ready to make those infrastructure plays to help India be more than, it'll definitely be a source of training data. It'll definitely be a source of, there's a lot of data available in India. So if it's in healthcare, or if it's in any number of fields, you can leverage the data in India already. But I think India is going to have more ambition. It's going to want to be a part of the global AI story. Obviously, the Prime Minister doing the summit is a part of that, but I think this is an area where the Indians will come and say, hey, we're ready to level up. And there's a lot of areas right now that are contested in areas of concern: supply chain, critical minerals, where we're going on AI. Like mentioned quantum. There's a lot of areas where the worry really in the West is, are we going to keep our edge? How India plays into keeping the edge vis-a-vis China becomes much more than just a security story.
In terms of collaboration, it looks like imperative, because look, India has been a traditional IT powerhouse, and a lot of global platforms have been powered, and a lot of global CEOs actually are of Indian origin, and at some point in time started in India actually. So collaboration is fine, but as our friend here says that it's going to be more ambition on part of India. Is the West ready? Is the United States ready to accommodate that that ambition in the field of AI and other emerging tech?
Well, what was interesting was at the very end of the Biden term, there was an executive order that came out on high performance chips, the limiting how many can be sent to India and other countries. I think that which should be a goal of the Trump administration is try to strip that away. Because I think unless India has access to high performance chips, it limits what India can do. And so, yes, on the private sector side, there's enormous collaboration, but we need to make sure that the barriers are removed.
The barriers are removed, says our friend there, Ingrid. But easier said than done?
No, I again think that there's so much synergy in terms of the eventual objectives here. I mean, we were talking about AI. So there are two use cases, if you will, for AI that I'd like to bring out. I think persistent surveillance is going to be a national security need, not just for U.S. and India, but for all like-minded nations. And persistent surveillance, therefore, you generate petabytes of data that you have to interpret, and AI will be a critical, founding block to enable that. The second aspect, and we see that in some of the conflicts around the world, is data resiliency. You need data to be resilient, and you need the threats from adversaries to be conquered, and that again will require AI. So these are just two examples of why both countries will continue to work together and increase strengths in that regard. I do think AI again leads to another aspect which was discussed in the first panel, which is we talked about nuclear energy, and I think AI requires a lot of energy, and so where is that going to come from? And so when we look at the energy mix, whether it's nuclear fusion or nuclear fission, both of them, both of those areas, again, require impetus, and I think India and the U.S. can work together on both of those.
Whenever any new platform or any new technology emerges, there's obviously a fear of technology to begin with. AI is currently probably going through that phase, and both in terms of job losses, both in terms of the upheaval that a new tech can cause, there's a lot of uncertainty in the minds of people, particularly the end users and the people who want to face the brunt. Do you think that a more collaborative manner of spread, a collaborative process of spread of AI can also address those challenges which are particularly important to vulnerable countries like India?
I think great that you brought this point. I was trying to touch this. A few months back, I was in UN, and it's a personal interest because our company focus on AI and data storage infrastructure. And that brings me to point, this is the first time when internet world came in, European Union was the first to bring the policy to control, to see schooling, to security. Similarly, the UN is now focusing on ethical committee on AI and trying to school things how it will be controlled. But last week, Google changed their policy to work on defense weapons and autonomous weapons and AI weapons. And similarly, India, where the security, privacy laws and laws are not that strong, India has to focus developing that. And this is the first time where globally, across whether it is China, whether it is India, whether it is Europe, AI talent is there. This is the first time at the same pace, everybody is trying to build models, everybody is trying to build some platforms, which will become part of the world by 2026, 2027. Gartner has published a report by 2027. World will be using AI in wars, in defense, and other sectors.
What do you think can be the big takeaway from this emerging out of this summit that we are going to see tomorrow? What do you think, is it going to be more cogent in terms of delivered outcome, or will it be a process that we will see being set in motion for the next 4 years?
I think it's going to be a combination. I think we've already seen that both governments are quite forward-leaning in terms of ambition. But there will be areas that are going to require work, trade being one of those. But I think on the defense side, we may see some early opportunities. Certainly making sure that there's a continuation of some of the programs that exist today. especially the honoring the tech transfer agreements that have been agreed to. But I think it's going to be an exciting 4 years ahead.
And to go back to the point that you made, that executive order during the President Biden's term needs to be rolled back. Do you see any tangible progress being made, delivered out of this summit, or do you think it'll again be a little more process driven?
I think it'll be more process driven. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.